What's going on, everybody? Another edition of the Pass Ball Show. As always, happy to be with you. If you're on the Facebook Live broadcast, we're probably going to lose connection in a little bit. So anything that's on your mind that you want to shoot my way from a comment standpoint, throw it up there. Otherwise, forever hold your peace. Well, in a little bit, we're going to talk about the new all-time sack leader in the history of the National Football League. Some frustrations about some of the things we see in the All Star Game, and I'm not gonna spend 1 second talking about the uniforms because I could care less about them. Obviously, it's a topic where a lot of people seem to want to voice their opinion about. But I was thinking about the old Patriot way, from the New England Patriot standpoint, a team and organization that really has, over the course of the last 20 years, become the New York Yankees of professional sports. A team that, if you're a fan of, you're probably feel like you're going to be pinched at any second in a dream, like it's supposed to end at some point. And perhaps with Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and winning a Super Bowl there, maybe it really is over. But if you go back over the last 20 years, there really hasn't been a more dominant team in professional sports. And it doesn't just happen overnight. It's not just a coincidence that, 9 times that team was good enough to get to the Super Bowl, and 6 times, just with the combination of players they had, they somehow managed to win the entire thing. So I look deeper into that, and obviously there is a way, there has to be an attitude, there has to be something that doesn't get accepted, whether it's from the ownership, whether it's from the front office, whether it's from the players themselves, maybe led by Tom Brady, who knows. But there's something that has to be there, a stigma that has to stick amongst the players that are there to really refuse to accept losing, to refuse to accept anything less than what is considered a superior product to be put on the field game in and game out, year in and year out. And with that, you're not going to please everybody. And it's funny because you could think of all the different players that have been in and out of what you may want to call the system as it applies to the New England Patriots. But one of the things that stays consistent is the fact that the results were championship caliber. And there's a player, and I actually had to write his name down because his impact in the National Football League is just not there. It's not like we're talking about one of the greats to play defense in the National Football League, a superior edge rusher. There's a guy by the name of Cassius Marsh who decides he's a little upset about the way that he felt he was treated with the Patriots. He looks back, he says, "Oh man, they didn't give me enough lunch breaks. They didn't make it fun for me when I played there for a half the season." And I think one absolutely has to do with the other. There's an attitude that probably takes fun, which sports, yes, up to a certain point are supposed to be fun, but fun becomes secondary or tertiary when it comes to having a superior product and winning. You play a sport, and I hate to say it, and I know we're in a participation trophy era of this country and this world, but sports competition, it's intended for one team or one person to win. And when a game's played, there's usually one winner. Now, it doesn't mean that the loser or the person that comes in second or the person that doesn't come out on top didn't try hard, didn't play well, didn't give their best. But competition is about winning. And there is no coincidence that there's a winning mentality that's set and it's constant and synonymous amongst winning teams. The Yankees of the late 1930s, the Yankees of the early 1950s, what they had in common was a winning mentality, was the fact that the players that were brought in there, if they were new, they were raised by players and coaches in a system that expected the same type of excellence and dominance. And you could say, all right, maybe it's not a matter of just flicking a switch and being on. But you look at all the great teams in sports. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 1970s, the San Francisco 49ers of the 1980s, the Dallas Cowboys of the early to mid 1990s. And there is a system in place. When new players come in, the expectation is to play a little harder, to maybe not have as much fun as the other teams, because the expectation is to win. And Cassius Marsh, who I didn't hear of, and a lot of people didn't know who the heck he was before today, sounds like a bitter, sore loser. Went to play with the New England Patriots thinking things were going to be handed to him, thinking that there's no work involved, that there's no system in place to play the game differently, where the expectations are about winning. And you're talking about a player that's played for 7 teams in 7 years. 7 teams in 7 years you played for. And you want to throw your opinion in there thinking it means anything? The fact that you didn't last the full season with the New England Patriots meant you probably weren't set up for their way. The expectation for a team like the Patriots is supposed to be, yes, maybe they feel they're a little superior. But we're talking about Cassius Marsh, not Willie McGinnis, not Richard Seymour, not Vince Wilfork, not Mike Vrabel, not Teddy Bruschi. Cassius Marsh, who's lucky if he's going to be on the roster for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. Moving over, Baseball All Star Game. A couple things that have been synonymous with the history of the National League is they're not using the designated hitter. Probably the only league in all of baseball throughout the world that isn't using the designated hitter. And another thing synonymous with the National League is the fact that they lose every All-Star game. I don't know how it is. The players change over a series of years. You know, the 9th straight All-Star game that the National League lost, it's just becoming synonymous with baseball. But as I'm watching the game, and a couple things that kind of stick out to me. Number one, the players that are elected or selected that choose not to play for reasons that aren't injury related, for reasons that aren't personal related. I mean, if your wife is about to have a child and it happens to coincide with the All-Star break, I understand it. That's why I get it from Carlos Correa's standpoint. You got other players that are legitimately injured and can't play. Mike Trout would be an All-Star, except he hasn't played this year. So he's not going to play, and you understand. So I was thinking about it because I want to kind of factor in how it applies to other sports. Because if it was basketball, if you're talking about LeBron James or, you know, obviously back in the day, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Kevin Durant, a healthy Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin Durant probably has a little bit of an excuse because he's coming off major injuries. So it's totally understood why injured players wouldn't play in a respective All-Star game. You know, the commissioner gets involved and he says, hey, there's going to be something or some sort of sanction against players that decide not to play, or there's going to be some sort of mandate put to force players that are healthy and selected to play the game for their fans. And I think it's much to do about nothing. Because in the end, all you're asking these players to do is fake an injury. No matter what sport you're playing, you play with aches and pains. And if a player really doesn't want to play in a respective All-Star game, all they got to do is just cite an injury. And they might not even be lying about the injury. It could be very minor, but they could say it's enough to keep them out. I think it's hard to mandate that a player plays in a respective sports All-Star game. And obviously because of that, you get, in my opinion, replacement level players, or maybe above average major league players that aren't all-stars. When I'm watching Mike Zunino hit a home run, and I know he's got 19 home runs in the first half, you could talk about the negativity when it comes to catchers in Major League Baseball. There's not enough of them that hit. Buster Posey couldn't play. You know, you think of, there's not that many great catchers. Salvador Perez is having a great season. The year that Yadier Molina is having might not be considered all-time, but probably is amongst the best in all Major League Baseball amongst catchers. JT Realmuto. He's probably not having a JT Realmuto type of season, but you understand why he's an all-star. But you got a 198 hitting catcher playing for the Tampa Bay Rays that is going to call himself an all-star. And to me, I got a little bit of an issue with that. To me, I also have a little bit of an issue with the manager of a Major League Baseball All-Star Game having the authority to pick whatever players that he wants with no committee. Kevin Cash obviously wanted a couple more Tampa Bay Rays players there. Andrew Kittredge, who's a good reliever. He's had a good year. I don't think of him as an all-star. Joey Wendell is a utility player that hasn't had an all-star season, but he's an all-star now. So I have a little bit of an issue with that. If you're going to have the major league managers, which, by the way, you've heard me for years talking about the fact that they don't have any responsibilities, all of a sudden you want to give them full autonomy when it comes to selecting players for an all-star roster. I got a little bit of an issue with that. And then I look at the National League side and I see Dave Roberts putting Chris Taylor in the All-Star game when Chris Taylor is the furthest thing from an all-star. And I'm sure there's many markets, many factions of fans in the National and American League that are wondering why some of their players that are having superior years aren't getting the appropriate consideration to be replacements for all-star players that don't want to play, can't play because they're injured, or have some sort of other reason for not being there. Whit Merrifield has had a couple good years for the Kansas City Royals. This year isn't one of them. And you could say, hey, the Royals don't have anybody else to select to play. Salvador Perez is the starting catcher. So they got their representation. Whit Merrifield didn't need to be there. Jake Cronenworth. And I get it. Dave Roberts and the Dodgers, they see a lot of the Padres year in and year out. Jake Cronenworth was a Rookie of the Year in the National League last year. He's not having an all-star season. So I have a problem with the selection process, the way it's set up. It bothers me. And I think hopefully it'll change. But the problem is the game itself is getting very hard to watch. And I'm having a little bit of an issue when it comes to watching a regular season game over the course of a baseball season, let alone its all-star game. And I was thinking of a couple things that could be done. What do you got to do to bring a little more juice to the all-star game? Because I think the same is up there with other sports. Now in basketball, you kind of know what you're going to get. In hockey, you kind of know what you're going to get. No defense, bunch of points scored, a bunch of goals scored in hockey. In football, it's almost understood that half the country is going to be tone deaf to it. In fact, over the course of the last 5 years or so, the one thing that stands out to me, the moment that I remember the most about the Pro Bowl and the National Football League is the breaking news of the death of Kobe Bryant. So there's nothing in relation to football that I remember over the past 5, 10, even 20 years watching a Pro Bowl. And maybe I'm a little biased towards baseball, so I'm going to watch a baseball all-star game a little longer than I'm going to watch one in any other sport. But it's lost its luster. It's hard to enjoy a game like this. The uniforms, listen, I'm ambivalent about it. I could totally care less about whether teams wear their own players wear their own team uniforms or have some uniform, which obviously is the definition of the word, by the way. Uniform is to have everybody come out there looking the same. But, a good idea came up when it came to honoring the stars of the past. And I don't think baseball does a good enough job with that whatsoever. In fact, you think of some of the things that are frustrating. You think of its Hall of Fame. You think of an entire generation of players that played in the late 90s and the early 2000s that are completely neglected because of the suspicion of the use of performance-enhancing drugs. When you could talk about it, and I'm not going to turn this into a steroid conversation, but since the advent of competition, athletes, competitors have done everything they could to try to get themselves an advantage over somebody else. So baseball feels like it's holier than thou is going to be the only sport that's going to try to penalize players who tried to do something or have some sort of advantage over those that they were competing against. So that's neither here nor there. How about bringing back some of the stars of Christmas past in baseball, having them play a little bit in an All-Star game? You want to grab a 3-inning game with some American League and National League past All-Stars? They don't have to be Hall of Famers. But think about it. Have it regionalized to each city. The game's in Colorado. I'm not going to talk about reasons why the game isn't in Atlanta, which is an absolute joke. Hank Aaron, one of the greatest players of all time. You could have honored him in a city that he played for 9 years and a team he played for 21 years, but baseball decided that they were better than that and chose not to do it. Like I said, I don't want to talk about that anymore. But the Colorado Rockies hosting the All-Star Game, Coors Field this year. Where's Larry Walker? Where's Todd Helton? Where's Dante Bichette? You bring those players back and you have them compete against some All-Stars for other teams. And like I said, you want to go dig deep into your team's history. If you're the Giants, you want to bring Willie Mays out there. One of the greatest moments in All-Star Game history was when Ted Williams is being carted off around and basically going around Fenway Park in front of all the fans, generations of fans that are there, crying, people, unbelievable moment. You think of the greatest players to ever play in this game. How nice would it be to see Willie Mays come out? Last year, let's say Hank Aaron, and I'm going to guess he may not have been in the best physical shape. Had there been an All-Star Game last year? Imagine Hank Aaron getting to put his hand out, getting the ovation that he would have deserved. Baseball doesn't do enough to honor its players of the past. And that's sad. It really is. It's disappointing. But you tell me the Colorado Rockies couldn't have ran out a team of their All-Stars for a 3-inning exhibition game on Monday evening and played against some stars of the game that were willing to come there. I'm sure A-Rod wouldn't have minded playing. You could have gotten Frank Thomas and Papi Ortiz and Mariano Rivera or whoever. There's players that aren't that far removed from the game that could still probably put on a good show. And you can make a case that what you're seeing there in those 3-inning games could have been more interesting than what you were going to see in a game that's being thrown in your face anyway. Listen, I could break down some of the syncrasies in the game from yesterday. Some of the things that were cool. Freddie Peralta striking out 3 batters in an inning of work. Jared Walsh, the diving catch. But I could also talk about some of the players that were quote-unquote all-stars that really didn't deserve to be there in the first place. And I get it. Over the course of sports history, you're going to be able to make teams of all-stars that really didn't put up the performance to be all-stars. Especially when you're talking about fans selecting who ends up going. And think about the ballot box of the early 90s and the Reds teams and whatever teams happen to have their fans stuff the ballot box or due to online clicks at a little higher rate than other fans. And then the whole message that's set up to vote for your all-stars. Vote for all your favorite team's players, whether they deserve it or not. You're a Mets fan, vote for every friggin' Mets player that's on there. Who cares if one guy hasn't played all year? Who cares if the other guy's batting 150? If they're on the ballot, vote for them because they are your players. That's another element in the All-Star game that probably could benefit from changing. If you look over the course of time, it might be better to see an All-Star game where you actually have the best players in the sport. Now listen, some of it is going to be legacy. Some of it's going to be, the great players of years past that may not necessarily be having a great year in the current season. And you understand that. You don't want to make it, oh man, this player has been great for 5 years. He's a little off. He's not quite at the level that he was, so he shouldn't be an all-star. And, so-and-so has had a great 100 at-bats, so he gets to go. I think part of it is to make sure that the best players are at the game. And going back to what I said before, those players that decide they don't want to play after being selected, whether it's by the fans or by the league or because of their past performance, because they're deserving of being an all-star, there should be something that should force them to go. And I love Jacob deGrom as much as anybody else. But the fact that he can't show his face for 10 minutes, even if he's not pitching in a game, is a joke. And thank God Jacob deGrom isn't hurt. But the fact that he can't show up and kind of put his hand up to the fans in a game that he belonged in, like I said, it's like LeBron James being selected to start in a game. You don't mind if he chooses not to play. But the fact that he can't show up at the event and be there is a little disappointing. And I'm not going to knock Jacob deGrom because, it would be completely asinine to do so. The guy's the best pitcher in baseball. A guy, you could talk about the possibility he's probably the best player in baseball right now. But thinking about a matchup of Ohtani and deGrom could have created a little more buzz for the sport. And I don't know how you make a solution to this. Jacob deGrom, if he doesn't want to play that bad, if he wants to be with his family so bad, hey, my arm's hurting. Which, by the way, in a completely unrelated subject, Jacob deGrom's unavailability for Sunday's game put the Mets in a position where they didn't have a pitcher. But like I said, I'm not going to get into that. This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPLA.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by Two Ways, One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you're interested, check out Contending Baseball on the Contender. Really the new age of sports talk without commercials. You can check out my show from last week where I talked about issues going on with the All Star Game amongst other baseball topics. I'll have a fresh show available Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. So I'm going to conclude the show today with something pretty cool. Pro Football Reference has done a much better job, certainly Sports Reference with baseball, doing a great job bringing in Negro League stats, as the Negro Leagues are considered Major League Baseball, which they always should have been. But Pro Football Reference, under the same umbrella, has done a good job in researching stats from older football games and can trace sacks, which, if those of you that are a little ignorant to knowing, means a tackle of a quarterback in a game by a defensive player. And it traced sacks back to 1962. And my initial reaction when you find out that there is a new single-season sack holder, and it's not Michael Strahan, who set the record in 2001 in kind of an ominous way, with Brett Favre kind of laying on the ground. Did he give him the record? Whatever. It's kind of like Denny McClain's, telling Mickey Mantle what was coming when he wanted to throw the 500th home run of Mantle's career. Little things that happen still don't hide back from the moment that, was as important as it was. Michael Strahan is no longer the NFL's single-season sack holder. It's Al Bubba Baker. And if you think about it, you say, oh man, we're tracing back in stats. Maybe Al Baker played in 1962. Maybe Al Baker set the record in 1969. Al Baker had 23 sacks in, wait for it, 1978. Are you kidding me? You telling me that pro football and its history had a hard time dating back to 1978 to determine the all-time single-season sack leader? In the technological age that we live in, it has to be just computed, just brought up, that the NFL single-season sack leader was from 1978? No, not 1878. Not the emergence of the National Football League in 1920. We didn't find out that a player had more sacks in 1931. 1978 The majority of the adults listening to the program right now watched a football game in 1978. And after your thorough research, in the year 2021, we just figured out that Al Baker in 1978 had more sacks in a single season than any player in NFL history. It's a little odd, right? Want to send a message out to fans. And we understand that fans in general, fan is short for the word fanatic. You're going to attract most of the crazies. And the best advice that I could give somebody is to not generalize all fans of a particular team based off of what a couple jerks said. Sometimes people are going to say silly things. In fact, you're not going to have a major injury in all of sports without one clown sitting in a corner laughing about it, or one clown in a corner poking fun to it. And while I say it's a little disappointing that there's fans out there that are celebrating the injury of Atlanta Braves outfielder Ronald Acuna, I think the major issue is how we as society normalize the actions of and statements of very few to assume that that's the opinion that a lot of other people like them do. Now, I thought we were better than that. For all the movements that you've heard against, anybody that is considered different, or any differences or stereotypes or prejudices that you could put out there against somebody. We still want to generalize sports fans for the actions, statements, and opinions of a few. If a Met fan celebrates the fact that Ronald Acuna is injured, that doesn't mean that all Met fans feel that way. And I just think that we're a little better than that. Not just better for the people that go out there and say stupid things, because I think we're silly enough to believe that nobody should ever say something stupid. Stephen A. Smith goes out there and says something stupid. He gets a lot more attention because he's Stephen A. Smith. But John Q. Public is out there making stupid statements every day that nobody cares about because he's John Q. Public. Once again, this is the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPLA.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by Two Ways, One Passion Food Truck, located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We'll be back with you next week. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.